January 13th, 2015, Bronzeville, Chicago, South Side, 9:50 in the evening. The winter night is shattered by gunfire in a vacant lot near 39th and Calumet Avenue. Witnesses describe 3 men approaching from behind, weapons drawn. When the shooting stops, 16-year-old Terrell Campbell, known on the streets as Buddha, lies bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds to the abdomen, chest, and legs. He's rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where he's later pronounced dead. A local news report states the teenager was walking through a vacant lot in the 300 block of East Pershing Road when 2 gunmen approached and opened fire. Police are investigating, but no arrests have been made. This wasn't random violence. Terrell Buddha Campbell was a member of OBN, Oak Boy Nation, a gang allied with MTG 39, also known as Murder Town. His murder was one shot fire in a war that would span nearly a decade and claim over a dozen lives across Chicago's South Side. Tonight, we examine the deadly conflict between MTG 39 and their rivals 757 and 51 Young Money, a war where every death is counted, every loss is avenged, and the scoreboard never stops. This is the story of the scoreboard. Our story begins deep within the low end of Chicago. This is a stretch of the city officially known as Armour Square, but to those who live here, it is home, and it is also the territory of one of the city's most enduring and powerful street factions, MTG 39. MTG, short for Murder Town, holds its ground in the Wentworth Gardens projects. This sprawling public housing complex runs from 37th to 39th Street, bordered by Princeton and Wentworth Avenue. This is the heart of their world. According to deep-rooted gang databases, MTG 39 is a recognized gangster disciples set. They have been active on these streets since the 1970s. By the 1990s, their grip on the area was absolute. They forged a reputation that solidified their control over the low end as one of its most organized and most violent groups. The set operates under multiple banners. They are known as MTG, they are called the 30 Boys, and most simply, they are 39, a direct reference to their main block on 39th Street. Within this larger entity, several distinct cliques have emerged. There are the 30 Boys, Millie World named in honor of a fallen comrade, and Timo World, a name recognized throughout the city thanks to their most prominent member, the rapper who brought their story to the masses. A former gang intelligence officer puts their resilience into sharp perspective. MTG 39 has deep roots in Wentworth Gardens. They've held that territory for decades. It's not just a gang, it's generational. Fathers, sons, cousins all running together. This generational force does not stand alone. They maintain primary alliances with key groups across the South Side, including OBN, Oak Boy Nation, on 39th and Langley, GGE, Goon Gang Evans Mob, KTC, Killer Trey City, Welch World, and at various times THF 46. However, their enemies are numerous. The list of rivals spans across dozens of blocks: 757, also known as Do It Gang, 51 Young Money, OTV, Mafia Town, Geo Drive, Princeton Mob, Bricky Gang, 800, Frank Block, DT Way, Moose Block, Ghetto World, TTD, and Setville. But one conflict looms larger than any other. The most dangerous rivalry, the one that would truly define the gang landscape of Chicago's Southside throughout the entire 2010, is the violent, ongoing conflict between MTG 39 versus 757 and 51 Young Money. The cost of this war is devastating. Public records and community sources confirm that MTG 39 has lost countless members to violence over the years. We remember the deceased Millie, Nitty, Chemo, Doughboy, Draco, Terry, Curry, and G-Man Ward, D-Nice, Young, Dodo, Shaky, Don G, Ickdog, Mellow, and Devo, Sleepy, T Woods, Hot, Baldhead, Jivin' Boy, Whitey, Tyson, Callio, Lil Glock Wop, and Jeezy/Snow. The list is tragically long, and in this ongoing cycle of conflict, it tragically keeps growing. Every epic conflict has a flashpoint, a moment when simmering tensions ignite into full-scale war. For MTG 39 and their allies against the formidable opposition of 757 and 51 Young Money, that point was the year 2013. First casualty arrived quickly. The first to fall was Snoop, a member of 757's Lawless Clique. He was killed in a brazen shootout. In the immediate aftermath, The streets were quick to assign blame to MTG 39's key allies, OBN and Welsh World, yet the truth behind these street wars is often murky. Later investigations in online gang forums offered a different narrative. The actual shooter, it was claimed, was not from OBN, but rather Tay Savage from WWDC. One online post attempted to clarify the chaos. Tay Savage was the one who killed Snoop. OBN wasn't involved. But on the streets, clarity is a luxury. Whether the blame was accurate or not, the confusion surrounding Snoop's death had achieved its purpose. The stage for immediate, deadly retaliation had been set. Retaliation soon struck the ranks of 51 Young Money. Later in 2013, a member known as Cornbread was killed. This time, the paper trail was clearer. According to official FO documents, a fact later confirmed by multiple street sources, the shooter was identified as Kavo from the allied faction OBN or LVGVG. The murder was a confirmed hit, solidifying the new front in the war. As one forum post concisely stated, Kavo kills Cornbread, correct. The violence escalated further with the death of D'Angelo Porter, known on the street as Frump. He was a 23-year-old member of Young Money. While the exact date is disputed, some sources say 2013, others point to January 27, 2015. The facts surrounding his murder are locked in official records. FOIA documents confirm that Scooter from the OBN Alliance was responsible for the shooting. According to police reports, the attack was a cold, deliberate ambush. It occurred around 1:40 p.m. on the 600 block of East 50 Street. Scooter approached Frump from behind and fired a single shot to the head. Frump was rushed to Stroger Hospital but was pronounced dead hours later at 9:00 p.m. Another online post echoed the police findings. Scooter kills Frump. The case was open, yet the identity of the shooter remained officially unconfirmed by the Chicago police until August of 2019. By that point, however, the streets had already claimed their own. Scooter, the man named in the documents, was himself dead. The stage was now soaked in blood. The year 2013 marked the definitive beginning of a conflict that would rage for a decade, costing dozens of young lives and redefining the map of Chicago's South Side. In the brutal calculus of a street war, the lines between combatant and civilian often dissolve. Not every death is a strategic strike against an active rival. Sometimes tragedy finds you simply because you are in the wrong place, or because of a life you thought you had left behind. The date was February 1, 2014. The victim was Javon Boyd. Known on the streets as Ballhead, Boyd had once been a part of Murder Town, MTG 39, but on this night, he wasn't a gang member. He was a cab driver, simply trying to make a living, trying to support a different life. That evening, he picked up two passengers who would seal his fate, C-Dye and Rondo, both active members of the rival 600 set, or 6-0. According to chilling court documents, C-Dye and Rondo were on the hunt for rival gang members. When they couldn't locate their intended targets, their intent didn't waver. Instead, in a senseless act of violence, they turned on the man driving them. They shot and killed their cab driver, Javon Boyd, who died at the scene. His murder was an act of indiscriminate violence. A Reddit post chronicled the tragic event, Baldhead, Murder Town, better known as Javon Boyd. The cab driver who was shot by C-Dye 600, accompanied by Rondo 600 in February of 2014. Justice did eventually arrive for Boyd. C-Dye and Rondo were later arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and handed down lengthy prison sentences. Javon Boyd's death was not part of the bloody scoreboard between MTG and their primary rivals, 757 or 51 Young Money. Instead, it offered a devastating illustration of the inescapable gravity of gang life, a shadow that can consume anyone simply associated with a faction, even those who have desperately tried to drive away from it for good. If 2013 was the spark, 2015 was the inferno. This year became the deadliest on the calendar of the MTG conflict. 5 murders, a relentless back and forth cycle of retaliation where the scoreboard shifted with brutal speed. The bloodshed began on January 13, 2015. At approximately 9:50 p.m., 16-year-old Terrell Campbell was walking near 39th and Calumet in the Bronzeville area. 2 gunmen emerged from behind, opening fire. Terrell, struck multiple times in the chest and abdomen, was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where he died. On the streets, Terrell was known as Buddha or Boss Rel, an aspiring rapper who embraced the violence in his music. But beneath the street persona was the son of Yolanda Martin. She had already suffered the loss of one child to a stray bullet 15 years earlier. She had desperately tried to save Terrell. The Chicago Tribune quoted her grief. You're gonna end up just like your brother, and your brother didn't do anything. Yolanda had moved her family 7 miles away to Chatham, attempting to use distance as a shield, but Terrell kept returning to his old neighborhood. The night he died, he had snuck out after telling his mother he was going to bed. He returned to Bronzeville, where death was waiting. Street sources later pointed to BA from 757 as the primary shooter, though the involvement of a second person, Sonny from 757, was disputed. Regardless, the shooters were never apprehended, no arrests were made. Justice on the streets is often swift and brutal. By June 2015, 757 had lost one of their own. Sonny, the same member whose involvement in Buddha's murder was questioned, was killed. Multiple sources confirmed that the shooter was Scooter from OBN, one of MTG's most lethal allies. Initial rumors attempted to involve other factions like THF, but later investigation clarified the hit. Scooter was the killer. The streets demand equilibrium. Scooter, the man responsible for 2 rival deaths, Cornbread and Sonny, would not last the year. September 24, 2015. 3:35 p.m. Arian Gunn, the 20-year-old known as Scooter, was standing near 30th and Michigan Avenue when a dark-colored vehicle drove up and opened fire. Scooter was struck in the back and buttocks. He was transported to Strogo Hospital, the very place where he had sent his rival Front months earlier, and was pronounced dead at 4:13 p.m. The investigation soon zeroed in on the rival faction. Street sources claimed that Devo from 757, potentially aided by Muno from 757, and a member of 51 Young Money, had tracked down and killed Scooter in a direct retaliation for his action. Police arrested Devo for the murder in February 2016. However, years later, in November 2021, the case collapsed. An assistant state's attorney rejected felony charges due to uncooperative witnesses and insufficient evidence to secure a conviction. The case was marked cleared open exceptionally. Scooter had claimed 2 lives, and now his own life was taken. The grim irony added one final tragic layer. Tomorrow would have been his birthday. He never saw it. The scoreboard of 2015 was tallied in the morgue, and the violence showed no signs of abating. As the core conflict between MTG 39 and 51 YM intensified, the alliances began to ripple outward, creating new, unpredictable enemies. Around 2014 and 2015, members of MTG 39 were seen frequently associating with Taekwon World, or TW, another powerful Southside faction. This connection was personal. MTG members like Timo and Boss Luck were reportedly close with the TW group, many of whom had grown up and attended school together. This friendship, however, came at a price. Taekwon World was a bitter enemy of 757, and 757 quickly took notice of the new association. On social media, 757 members began to openly question the relationship, considering an expansion of their war. A post on Twitter asked directly, "So did TW help MT jump for them, or now?" The question was clear. Was 757 now forced to target TW because of their allegiance with MTG? This volatile atmosphere led to another senseless death. In 2015, a young man known as Chemo, full name Kamaif Hubbard, was tragically shot and killed at 66 in Blackstone. Chemo was claimed by Dearborn/Murder Time. The reported culprit was Front Street. This immediately raised alarm. Front Street was a black disciple set, and MTG was generally allied with the BDs in that geographical area. Why would an ally kill Chemo? The theory that quickly circulated online highlighted the danger of the new TW alliance. Chemo was likely mistaken for a Taekwon World member. Because MTG was publicly associating with TW, Front Street may have assumed Chemo was an enemy and acted on the assumption. Chemo's murder was the tipping point. The retaliatory anger from MTG was immediate and public. Timo from MTG instantly began to denounce Front Street, along with their associated groups 600 and No Block, on social media. One now deleted tweet from Timo declared, "BDK Front Street, yeah, we on that." The new rivalry was cemented when Wooski from 757, an enemy of MTG, later confirmed the perceived betrayal in a rap lyric, mocking MTG's lack of response, and necked, joking saying, "I was Front Street, they smoke Chemo and you still ain't blowing no heat." Regardless of who fired the shots, Chemo's death added an entirely new front to the conflict. MTG's core enemy list had just grown significantly, illustrating that in this ecosystem, friendships can be just as deadly as rivalries. The years 2016 and 2017 brought a dramatic, yet often confusing shift to the deadly scorecard. While the conflict with 757 and 51 Young Money raged on, these years introduced new complications, proving that not all violence came from the expected enemy. On September 19, 2016, a member of MTG 39 known as Doughboy was shot and killed on the 1300 block of South Langley Avenue. The details surrounding his death were particularly unsettling. According to multiple street sources, the shooter was identified as Damo from THF 44. This was deeply significant as THF was considered a supposed ally of MTG. Doughboy's murder suggested a potential internal breakdown, a dramatic falling out, or the emergence of a deadly new conflict between sets that should have been united. The social media posts from the time cemented this claim. Doughboy from MT39 was killed on 19 September 2016. He was killed by Damo from THF 44. The retaliation continues. Despite the complications of Doughboy's death, the primary war with 757 did not pause. Later in 2016, the ledger tipped back in favor of Murder Town. A member of 757 known as Bud was killed. Though details regarding the incident remain scarce, online sources attributed the murder directly to MTG 39. The violence continued into 2017. Another 757 member known as Ray Ray was killed. Again, street sources credited the murder to MTG 39. While there was some dispute about Ray Ray's exact affiliation with the 757 set, the message was clear. Murder Town was actively and successfully striking back at their primary rival. The scorecard showed MTG gaining ground on 757, but the war had become a chaotic free-for-all. The death of Doughboy served as a grim warning. In the low end, enemies could now emerge from any direction. By 2018, the conflict between MTG 39 and their primary rivals had become the defining narrative of the low end. Every new murder was automatically assigned to the ongoing war's ledger. This year, MTG 39 suffered two more losses, Terry and Draco. Both were killed in separate tragic incidents. In the immediate aftermath, the assumption was immediate and widespread. The enemy had struck again. Street sources and online forums quickly pointed the finger at 757 or 51 Young Money. It was the expected conclusion in a landscape defined by retaliatory violence. However, the truth on the streets is often more fractured than the narrative suggests. According to later investigations and police incident reports, neither rival gang was ultimately responsible for these murders. Terry's death and Draco's death both remain unsolved cases. A necessary correction emerged online. Terry and Draco from MTG 39 were killed in 2018, but neither 757 nor 51 YM were responsible. These deaths were devastating for Murder Town, further thinning their ranks, but in the context of the larger war, they served as a sobering reminder. The violence consumed in Chicago operates on multiple fronts. Not every tragedy feeds the core conflict, and sometimes the enemy remains unidentified. Terry and Draco's names, though lost to the streets, would not be added to the scoreboard of the ongoing, defining rivalry. In a war defined by relentless violence, some losses are simply more devastating than others. Among all the young men MTG 39 sacrificed to the streets, few stories are as heartbreaking as the fate of the war triplets. It began on May 4, 2019. It was 2:44 in the morning. Devin Ward, known as G-Devil, was just 15 years old. He was standing in the very place he should have been safest, the courtyard of a building in his own neighborhood, Wentworth Gardens, on the 3800 block of South Princeton Avenue. Gunfire erupted without warning. Devin was struck in the torso. He was rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center, but the injuries were fatal. He was pronounced dead shortly after. A contemporary report noted the stark facts. A 15-year-old boy was killed early Sunday in a shooting in the Wentworth Gardens neighborhood on the south side. The boy was standing in a courtyard when he was shot in the torso. Devin Ward was born on April 1, 2004. He was one of a set of triplet brothers claimed by MTG 39. The streets knew immediately who was responsible. According to sources and online forums, the rival coalition had struck yet again. Members of 51 Young Money and 757 were blamed for the shooting. Despite the certainty on the street, no arrests were ever made. Area Central detectives investigated, but the key to a conviction and Devin, with no cooperation, never materialized. Devon was survived by his twin brothers, Division, and their third sibling, left to bear an unimaginable grief. The pain was reflected in their music, as one MTG member would later rap, "I lost G-Man, then we went up 4. They know it's me when I swing through the 4. For the remaining brothers, the shadow of violence was inescapable. Just under 2 years after Devon's murder, the family was struck again. April 9, 2021, Devion Ward, known as G-Man, was 17 years old. He was shot and killed in the same deadly perimeter, the Wentworth Gardens area. Devion was shot in the back and was taken to Stroger Hospital, but he too succumbed to his injuries. This time, the attack wounded 2 others, a 16-year-old and an 18 to 20-year-old, who miraculously survived. Devion Ward had been born on April 1, 2004, sharing his birthday with his fallen triplet brother Devon. They had come into the world simultaneously. Now, a brutal war had claimed them both. The online memorials are heavy with the weight of this double tragedy. Social media is filled with heartbreaking photos of the 3 brothers smiling together, with mournful captions like, "Probably some of the saddest pictures I've seen." The story of the Ward triplets remains the most searing, painful chapter in a conflict that continues to cost the future of a generation. The calendar flipped into a new decade, but the cycle of bloodshed remained constant. The final rounds of the conflict between MTG 39 and their rivals were fought with grim determination, pushing the mounting casualty list toward its conclusion. Strikes against Murdertown died first. The war claimed Curio, also known as Curry 30, a member of MTG 39. Street sources quickly pointed to the familiar enemy, Carter from Rock Nation. 757 was credited with the killing. The loss was memorialized online, MTG 39, Corito 30. Then, in 2020, another MTG member, Sleepy, was killed. Again, online sources attributed the fatal strike directly to 757. The rival coalition was catching up. In the year 2021 was a violent rush of final retaliations. First, MTG struck back decisively. A member of 757 known as Big Folks was killed. This time it was a lethal joint operation. Street sources confirming the shooters were Lil Matt from OBN and Cortez from MTG 39. The unified front was successful. Next, 757 suffered another loss with the death of Gunsmoke. Street sources claimed OBN was responsible, though some suggested OTV might have played a role. Despite the dispute, the perception on the street was clear. The MTG alliance was dominant in this exchange, but the final word did not belong to Murdertown. Later in 2021, 757 struck back in a final act of retribution, claiming the life of an MTG 39 member known as Dodo. The rivalry that had defined a decade of violence now settled into a fragile, bloody equilibrium. The war had exhausted its participants, leaving behind a staggering list of the dead, a community scarred by loss, and a generation marked by endless conflict. While the war between MTG 39 and their main rivals was tracked via a public scoreboard, the true toll of the conflict extended far beyond those specific numbers. Even as the core rivalry reached its bloody conclusion, the pervasive danger of the streets continued to claim lives. These were the additional, silent losses that year. In 2021, MTG 39 lost Callio, who was shot multiple times within his own neighborhood and pronounced dead at the scene. Callio was known to be extremely close to another member, Lil Glock, who was tragically killed that same year. The fact that these young men were killed in their own territory underscored a devastating reality. There was no safe ground. The loss of 2 close allies within a year was a profound blow to the set's morale and strength. The violence also reached back and claimed some of the faction's veterans. A member known as Whitey or Tyson was shot along with a companion in his own neighborhood. He later died at the hospital. Tyson was believed to be an original member of MTG 39, highly respected, yet typically low-key, a quiet figure whose death resonated deeply. His notoriety reached beyond the streets. Some believe he is the Tyson mentioned by the famous Chicago rapper Lil Durk in his song 2.5, cementing his place in the city's tragic folklore. Finally, the cycle of violence brought an MTG member's death into connection with an entirely separate conflict. Jeezy, also known as Snow, a member affiliated with both MTG 39 and Dog Pound, was killed. The discovery of his body at the crime scene eventually led to the arrest of Mally from the NLMB No Limit Musket Boys faction, highlighting how the conflicts across the South Side are tragically intertwined and frequently bleed into one another. These additional deaths, uncounted on the primary scoreboard, serve as the final testament to the scale of the violence. The war claimed not just rivals but neighbors, friends, and the original figures who built the set, leaving MTG 39 deeply scarred but ultimately still standing. As the street conflict spiraled out of local control, the violence eventually attracted the most serious form of legal intervention, the federal government. In recent years, a major federal indictment was unsealed targeting the Murdertown faction. The charges were staggering, naming 21 members and associates of the 39 set. The criminal enterprise was accused of wide-ranging violence, including participation in a criminal organization responsible for at least 15 murders, 9 attempted murders, armed robberies, and assaults. The indictment detailed how Murder Town members allegedly used threats and intimidation to silence victims and witnesses. Crucially, they actively promoted their violence on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, posting photos, videos, and comments specifically designed to taunt rivals and boast about the murders they had committed. Federal prosecutors actively described the operation as a violently protected drug dealing operation on the low ends of Chicago. A former gang intelligence officer confirms the strategy. The feds have been watching MTG for years. They use social media as evidence. Rappers post videos dissing their ops, showing guns, talking about bodies. It all goes into the case file. In the digital age, their public boast became their own undoing. The violence in Wentworth Gardens found its clearest, loudest expression in the Chicago drill music scene. MTG 39 has produced several rappers who effectively document the gang's lifestyle and conflicts, transforming street life into lyrics that reach a global audience. The most prominent voice is Timo, who raps as Timo MTG 39 or 39 Timo. His social media is a direct mirror of the conflict, with his lyrics and tweets frequently referencing the ongoing war. In one tweet, Timo openly declared war on his rivals. Murder Town fuck the ops, D laws for lawless, fuck the ops, 600 and 300k die rock, fuck all the ops. Other MTG members who have been active include Boss Luck, who was famously confronted on social media by M Thang from O Block for claiming BDK, Black Disciples Killer. Rapper Dursky captured the tragedy of the triplets, referencing the loss of Devion, I lost G-Man, MTG 39. Then we went up 4. They know it's me when I swing through the 4. Even newer talent like the rising drill rapper Fully Chop continues the tradition with songs like Crack This Head and Devil in My Head, reflecting the harsh, unrelenting reality of life in these neighborhoods. But this art form carries a lethal risk. As a local producer explains, these guys are telling their stories. It's real life for them, but it's also evidence. Police use rap lyrics in court. Social media posts become part of murder investigations. The very music that gives them notoriety also provides the prosecutor with their strongest case. Every death sparks two reactions, grief and gloating. When the Ward triplets G-Vo and G-Man were killed, the outpouring of sorrow online was immense, with photos circulating under captions like RIP G-Vo and Happy Birthday to the Triplets. These posts were monuments to private sorrow, but the moment a rival fell, the celebration began. When MTG members were killed, 757 and 51 YM members would post smoking references, a grim, disrespectful way of announcing they were celebrating the enemy's death. The reaction to Dodo's murder in 2021 was a perfect example, with online comment sections filling instantly with mourning from supporters and taunts from rivals. MTG members in turn were equally harsh. The recorded video reaction of an MTG 39 member celebrating the death of 757's BA was shared widely, completing the loop. The cycle of celebration and retaliation is a core component of this war. Each disrespectful post, each taunt, becomes the fuel for the next murder. As of late 2025, many of the murders chronicled in this conflict remain officially unsolved. Chicago police diligently open homicide investigations for every case, but the reality on the ground is that witnesses are scarce and cooperation is minimal. The official records often reveal the frustrating truth. In the case of Darren Scooter Gunn's murder, a suspect was arrested, but charges were ultimately rejected due to uncooperative witnesses. The case was cleared open exceptionally, meaning police believe they know who committed the crime but cannot successfully prosecute it. The murder of 18-year-old MTG member Tyvel Qualls in 2020 followed the exact same tragic script. An incident report indicated that the offender was the same person who fatally shot the victim, yet in November 2021, an assistant state's attorney rejected felony charges. A veteran Chicago homicide detective, speaking anonymously, summarized the devastating reality. It's the same story every time. We know who did it, the streets know who did it, but nobody will testify. So the case goes cold. The silence of the community guarantees that justice remains elusive and the cycle of violence is free to turn once more. The true casualty count is not measured in gang ledgers, but in the devastation inflicted upon the Wentworth Gardens community itself. Residents live in constant crippling fear. Police dispatch reports, like the one from September 12, 2020, frequently detail the terror. Multiple people shot on MTG 39 Hood, possibly a couple of people shot. Children in this environment do not have the luxury of childhood. Community activist explains the harsh cost. These kids don't get to be kids. They see their friends killed. They see memorials on every corner. By the time they're 12, they've been to more funerals than birthday parties. Mothers like Yolanda Martin, who lost both her sons Terrell and Tyree to gun violence, have become activists, trying desperately to break the cycle. But the cycle endures. A brutal equation where one user on a social media discussion aptly summarized the feeling. Emo is the 757/Mellyway shorties, but again, I'm just sharing my opinion. The violence, driven by rivalry and grief, shows no sign of stopping. The final scoreboard of this war reads, OBN or MTG, 7, 757 or 51 YMF 5. But what truly does that mean? It means 12 young men, many still teenagers, are dead. 12 families shattered, 12 funerals, 12 graves. We remember their names, not just their street monikers. Devon G. Devon Ward, 15 years old. Terrell Buddha Campbell, 16 years old. Darian Scooter Gunn, 20 years old. D'Angelo Front Porter, 23 years old. And countless others. Sonny, Big Folks, Gunsmoke, Sleepy, Dodo, Callio, Lil Glock, Bud, Ray Ray, Karatio, Doughboy, Chemo, Baldhead, Whitey, Jeezy. These were not just numbers on the scoreboard. They were sons, brothers, and friends whose lives were sacrificed for territory and pride. In Wentworth Gardens, on 39th and Princeton, life tragically goes on. Children still play in the same courtyards where their older brothers were killed. Mothers still grieve. And until the deep silence of fear is broken, the cycle of violence will continue to turn, demanding an endless, devastating price. But what truly does that mean? It means 12 young men, many still teenagers, are dead. 12 families shattered, 12 funerals, 12 graves. We remember their names, not just their street monikers. Devon Gudo Ward, 15 years old. Devion Ward, 17 years old. Terrell Buddha Campbell, 16 years old. Darian Scooter Gunn, 20 years old. D'Angelo Frump Porter, 23 years old. And countless others. Sonny, Big Folks, Gunsmoke, Sleepy, Dodo, Callio, Lil Glock, Bud, Ray Ray, Curio, Doughboy, Chemo, Ballhead, Whitey, Jeezy. These were not just numbers on the scoreboard. They were sons, brothers, and friends whose lives were sacrificed for territory and pride. In Wentworth Gardens, on 39th and Princeton, life tragically goes on. Children still play in the same courtyards where their older brothers were killed. Mothers still grieve. And until the deep silence of fear is broken, the cycle of violence will continue to turn, demanding an endless, devastating price.